HOA Karen said my house was small, but the truth is, my home is actually bigger than her HOA office. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I was excited. I had worked so hard for this place, and it was finally mine. The paint was fresh, the yard was clean, and everything felt like a dream. But dreams don't always stay safe in the hands of an HOA, especially when someone like Karen is sitting at the top. Karen was the kind of person who believed the neighborhood belonged to her. She walked around with a clipboard, taking notes about people's lawns, fences, and even the size of their mailboxes. The first time I met her, she didn't greet me with a smile. She didn't say, "Welcome to the community." Instead, she stood at the edge of my driveway, looked at my house, and said, "Looks small compared to the rest. Are you sure this is the right fit for you?" That one sentence hit me harder than I thought it would. I had worked for years to buy this home. I didn't need her approval, but something about the way she said it felt like she was trying to shrink me down, just like she was shrinking my house with her words. But here's the thing. People like Karen don't realize that a home isn't about square footage. It's about the love inside, the memories you create, and the effort you put into making it yours. I smiled, even though inside I was boiling, and I simply said, "It may look small, but it's bigger than your HOA office." She froze for a second, not expecting that response. From that day forward, I knew this wasn't just going to be about living in a nice neighborhood. It was going to be a battle. Karen had a way of making rules bend in her favor. If she wanted her friends to get away with parking on the street overnight, she'd look the other way. But if I left my trash can out a little longer than usual, I'd get a letter in the mail. Every single time. And the worst part? She always made it personal. One afternoon, I was trimming my hedges when Karen walked by. She stopped, tilted her head, and said, "Still looks small, doesn't it? Maybe you should consider some additions. Something to bring it up to standard." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you use when you're tired of being poked. "Karen," I said, "my house doesn't need to grow to prove its worth. It already stands taller than the office where you write your little fines." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. She just wrote something on her clipboard and walked away. That moment changed something inside me. I realized Karen wasn't just being picky. She wanted control. She wanted to make me feel like I didn't belong. But I wasn't about to let her win. The more she tried to push me down, the stronger I became. When she sent letters, I saved every single one. When she made comments, I recorded them in a little journal. I wasn't just dealing with her in the moment. I was preparing for the day I'd stand up and show everyone who she really was. Because here's the truth. HOA bullies like Karen thrive on silence. They feed off people being too tired, too busy, or too scared to fight back. But silence wasn't my option anymore. I remember one particular meeting where Karen tried to embarrass me in front of the other homeowners. She stood at the front, tapping her papers like she was about to deliver some great speech. Then she said, "Some of us need to remember that when we move into this neighborhood, our homes should reflect a certain standard. Small homes don't really help the image of our community." She looked straight at me when she said it. The room went quiet. People shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. My heart pounded in my chest, but I refused to look away. I raised my hand and calmly asked, "Karen, can I ask how big the HOA office is? Because last time I checked, my house has more square feet than the very building where you sit and decide what's acceptable. If my home isn't good enough, what does that say about your office?" The room erupted in whispers. Karen's face turned red, and for the first time, she didn't have a quick answer. She stammered, shuffled her papers, and moved on to the next topic. But everyone had already seen it. Everyone had already heard it. That day, the power started to shift. Neighbors who used to stay quiet started talking to me. They shared their own stories, how Karen had fined them unfairly, how she had insulted their gardens, or how she had made them feel like outsiders in their own homes. I wasn't alone anymore. And that's when I realized, the only way to deal with someone like Karen is to show them that their words don't define you. My house wasn't small. My house was my dream, my pride, my safe space. It stood bigger than any HOA office, bigger than Karen's ego, and bigger than the petty rules she tried to use against me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for every neighbor who felt the weight of her control. And I wasn't going to stop. Because when you fight for your home, you're not just fighting for walls and windows. You're fighting for your dignity, your peace, and your right to live without someone constantly trying to shrink your worth. And this was only the beginning. If you've ever faced someone who tried to make you feel small, stick around for what comes next. Because in Section 2, I'll show you how I turned the tables on Karen completely, and how the community finally saw the truth. Don't forget to like this story, share it with someone who needs the courage to stand up, and let me know if you've ever had to deal with a Karen in your life. Your story might just inspire someone else to fight back. Karen thought she had the upper hand. For months, she kept sending me letters, knocking on my door, and making little comments every time she passed by. But what she didn't know was that I had been preparing. Every word she said, every unfair fine, every insult, it was all recorded. I knew one day I would need proof. Proof that she wasn't protecting the neighborhood. Proof that she was abusing her position to control people. And the day finally came. It all started when she tried to find me again. This time, it wasn't about my trash cans or my hedges. She wrote me up because my front door color didn't fit the community standards. The funny part, 3 of her friends had the exact same color on their doors. Not one of them received a letter. Only me. That was the moment I decided it was time to fight back. I walked into the next HOA meeting with a folder in my hands. My heart was racing, but I knew I wasn't walking in alone. Behind me were neighbors, people Karen had pushed around, people who had been waiting for someone to stand up. Karen opened the meeting like she always did, with her smug little smile and her clipboard. She started talking about upholding community values and keeping standards high. But before she could move on, I raised my hand. Before we continue, I said, I'd like to share something with the group. Karen frowned. This isn't the time for personal issues, she snapped. But I didn't back down. It's not personal. It's about this entire community. I opened the folder and laid out letter after letter on the table. Dozens of them. Fines for ridiculous things. Notes where she insulted the size of my house. Records of her bending the rules for her friends. Gasps spread around the room as people saw the evidence. Then I pulled out something that sealed the deal, a recording. One afternoon, Karen had made another comment about my tiny house while laughing with a friend. I had caught the whole thing on my phone. I played it out loud for everyone to hear. Her words echoed through the room. His house looks like a dollhouse. Honestly, it drags down the whole street. The room went silent. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to grab control, waving her hands and saying the recording was taken out of context. But nobody believed her anymore. One neighbor stood up and said, "She fined me for leaving my car in the driveway overnight. But her friend does it all the time, and nothing happens." Another said, "She called my garden tacky. Who gave her the right to talk to people like that?" One by one, neighbors found their courage. People who had stayed quiet for years finally spoke up. And in that moment, Karen's power began to crumble. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She wasn't the queen of the neighborhood anymore. She was just a woman caught in her own lies. I looked at her and said, "Karen, you told me my house was small. You tried to make me feel like I didn't belong here. But my home isn't small. My home is bigger than your office. Bigger than your rules. Bigger than your ego. And today, everyone sees that." The room erupted in applause. Some people even stood up. Karen tried to gather her papers, but she couldn't hide the shaking in her hands. The board voted that night. For the first time, Karen didn't get her way. They decided to review every fine she had ever issued. They decided to change the system so that no one person could hold all the power. And best of all, they removed Karen from her position as head of the HOA. When the meeting ended, neighbors came up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing up. One woman even said, "You gave us our voice back." That hit me harder than anything else. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. From that day on, things changed. The neighborhood felt lighter. People smiled more. Conversations didn't end with complaints about Karen. And every time I pulled into my driveway, I looked at my house. Not small, not unworthy, but proud, strong, and mine. Karen. She avoided me after that. She walked quickly past my yard, eyes on the ground, no clipboard in sight. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was just another neighbor. And that's the thing about people who try to make you feel small. In the end, they shrink themselves. Their power only lasts as long as you let it. My house was never small. It was my dream. It was my victory. And it stood taller than any HOA office ever could. So, if you've ever faced someone who tried to belittle you, remember this: your worth is not measured by their opinion. Your value doesn't shrink because someone else can't see it. Stand tall, speak up, and fight for what is yours. Because at the end of the day, the only person who gets to define your home, your life, and your happiness is you. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who's dealing with their own Karen. Hit that like button, drop a comment about your own experience, and remember, you are bigger than anyone who tries to make you feel small.